Hello again, Andrew here, and this is episode 156. This is a very interesting one because I started this a little while ago and discovered as I was reading the text that I had got it completely back to front. So I had to rework it, and it's been really quite positive, so very interesting. We're continuing in Matthew 21 verses 28 to 32. We've been looking at the challenge of the religious leaders of Jesus in the temple and on what authority he was calling on to exercise the ministry that he was, and of Jesus' pushback and asking whose authority John the Baptist was working under, and they realized, of course, that they were caught on the horns of a dilemma. And so we pick up the narrative that because Jesus is continuing to press them. And so he tells them a parable, and here we go at verse 28. What do you think, he says? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, Son, go and work in the vineyard. He answered, I will not. But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same, and he answered, I go, sir. But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? They said, the first. Jesus said to them, Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him. As I said, this is a continuation of our last episode. Jesus is in a conversation with the religious leaders about the nature of spiritual authority. He's been challenged. What gives you the right? And he's pushed back. And now he's being proactive and going on the offensive. I thought at one time he was just being clever and evasive. Yet as we see where this is going, we discover that he's simply taken one step back in order to make room to take some bigger steps forward. It's easy to get hooked on the parable and miss the connection with what is going on and the message that Jesus is wanting to send. I had to give it some reflection and seek to put myself into the story in order to understand it. So let's look first at the parable, consider its message independently of the overall narrative, and then look at how it fits in. A landowner has 2 sons. The first, presumably the elder, has been asked to go and work in the vineyard and refuses. The younger is also asked and agrees. Yet it is the younger who doesn't go and the elder who does. The question that Jesus asks is, which of the 2 did the will of his father? To which the obvious reply was the first, presumably the elder son. At one level, this can be taken simply as an encouragement to fulfill our promises. If we say yes, then do yes. The younger son actually diminishes the sense of esteem and integrity in which he's held. He is no longer seen to be reliable, nor a person of his word. His relationship with his father is compromised. At this level, it is a simple morality tale. Yet, as we enter into the story, we see how it might have unfolded. The first, the elder, is asked, and he says no. There's a certain kind of jarring rebelliousness in his refusal. The younger hears the elder being asked, and seeing the rejection of his father, agrees to go to work. Yet, as a little time goes by, he, the elder, notices his father out there working on his own, and as yet his younger brother, who promised to help, hasn't showed up. He gets to the point where love for his father is greater than his commitment to saying no. And out he goes to work alongside Dad and harvest the grapes. The younger son now looks out, sees his older brother at work, and decides that the urgency for him to help is gone, and he can slope off and do his own thing. Perhaps there is no love lost between the 2 brothers. We've seen that one before. It may or may not have happened like this. This is, though, an unusual parable, It's an unusual one where we try to connect it with the narrative that it's fitting into. Who in the parable, for example, represents the religious leaders, and who represents the prostitutes and tax collectors? I'm wanting to suggest that, well, let's just look at what I've written here. It's hard to say. Maybe neither of them does, or maybe both sons potentially represent the religious leaders, and the prostitutes and tax collectors aren't represented at all, and that's what I think is going on here. There is the possibility that the religious leaders actually represent the older brother, who initially says no to both John the Baptist and to Jesus, yet seeing what is happening have a change of heart. And that the younger brother also represents the religious leaders, this time in their turning away, even though they have made commitments to God and acting as workers alongside their father in the vineyard. They've committed themselves to being the stewards of the vineyard. They've said yes, and yet they failed to show up when the time demands it. It seems to me then that both the elder and the younger brother represent the religious leaders. One as they might have been, initially refusing to see what God was doing, and yet ultimately getting with the program. And the other, where they thought they were with the program and had said yes to it, yet when seeing what it looked like, turned away. To see the prostitutes and tax collectors being embraced in this vision of the kingdom was just beyond the pale for them. And they were unwilling to notice the changed lives that were resulting in these people. While as the first son, who initially said no, sadly, they ultimately became the second son. The religious leaders failed to see the urgency of the moment in the ministry of John the Baptist. And although, as keepers of the faith, should have been at the front of the queue to stand alongside John, backed away. They just backed away. When they saw the riffraff signing up for John's way, they exited with the firm belief that not only were they not needed, this couldn't be God's way, because if it were, those people would not be included. They were beyond the holiness pale, and they, the religious leaders, failed to recognize that the harvest, God's harvest, was happening without them. In Jesus' understanding, God was clearly at work in the life and ministry of John the Baptist, just as he is at work in his own life and ministry. That the prostitutes and tax collectors were coming to faith, receiving grace and life, was not a sign that God was absent from it all, but a sign that God was very much present and at work in it. Jesus' clear message was that the religious leaders had got it completely wrong, that they had missed God's moment simply because of their own smugness, because of their own sense of entitlement, their own sense of superiority, and a settled belief that not only did they have God in their corner, but that it was not possible that God would want to bless and minister with such sinners as these. Even if the thought had occurred to them that John the Baptist's ministry could be of God, they had too much invested in things staying exactly the way they were. They had too much to lose. And to accept Jesus' vision of the kingdom, where the first were last and the last first, where the rich and the powerful had a difficult time to even embrace such a possibility, was untenable to them. It turned everything, the whole order they understood to have been ordained by God, on its head, and it was untenable. Like the rich young ruler, they had far too much to lose to be open to either John or Jesus. So, though Jesus doesn't say so explicitly, he's clearly implying that the authority of John the Baptist, and for his own ministry, and for all that he's doing here in the temple, are from God. And we'll see more of this in the next episode. God bless you.